So I want to share something with you that happened yesterday. It's just, one of these things that helped me realize why it's so important to do the work that I'm doing. So I am trying to figure out this whole Eventbrite thing. I'm using it to sell tickets for the Vegan Praxis of Black Lives Matter conference, and I was trying to figure out how to send the newsletter about it out to some of my contacts, but somehow I sent it out to like every person on my Gmail contacts list. So my bad. Now we're like literally, it was 2,000 people. So it was a mistake. And apparently I'm part of Free Cycle Berkeley, and it was sent to everyone on that list. So a woman wrote back, and her response to the poster was the following. Okay, this is funny. So she says, "This is not appropriate place to post this. I am not amused." So I'm thinking, I'm always impressed by how people can just assume the worst in people, and they just feel like they have a little more power because they're on the internet using email versus being in a physical location next to the person they want to talk to. So they can actually be a little more callous, I guess, right? So I responded and I said, I didn't mean to send it to Berkeley Free Cycle. It was automatically connected to my Gmail contacts, and I sent it to everyone, unfortunately, so sorry. I'm learning how to use Eventbrite still. Perhaps you don't have to assume the worst and consider people make mistakes. Just always curious why we live in such an unforgiving culture. Best, Breeze. And her response was, "Thanks for telling me it was a mistake. It's nice to have some places that are free of politics." So I am just thinking that apparently, like, me expressing my concern for being a Black person in a white supremacist USA and constantly witnessing tens of thousands of brown and Black people being, attacked and abused by systems and structures and institutions, it makes this person uncomfortable. It's too political. And I'm just, like, my heart hurts when I hear that. And just a little bit of the searches of this person's name comes up with images that reveal this person to be what I read them as to be white, a white person, probably a female because of their name, being connected to most people naming their children who are women or girl identified with such a name. And it just really hurt me deeply because, no, this is not just like some individual person with their right to have a belief. This is a white person who confidently feels that you can actually or need to be in spaces that are free of politics. Racial politics, right? But that's not neutral, and that is not a raceless stance. That is a white way of thinking about the world and spaces. Because when white people occupy spaces, when they think about things collectively in the USA, they are racialized to think that they have no race. They are racialized to think that it's the people of color that are raced, but they're not racist. They're raceless. And by the way, we live in a post-racial society, so we really shouldn't be talking about this stuff anymore. And stuff like Ferguson and the Black Lives Matter, that is too, like, racially political, so why do I have to have this conversation? My feelings are being hurt. I feel so uncomfortable. I want this space to be free of racial politics. So that's a privilege, right? It's a privilege to be able to not have to talk about it or think about it. And then you can invoke the whole white fragility thing, and that's an article written about a year or two back. It's called White Fragility. You can invoke that by saying, I feel uncomfortable. I want a space that's free of racial politics because my feelings are going to get hurt. I feel uncomfortable. What a privilege that you can just say you feel uncomfortable talking about the politics of race. That's a privilege, right? You don't have to think about the fact that me and like millions of people that look like me are actually being hurt, physically hurt, emotionally devastated by systems of racialized violence against us. So, you just don't want to handle the discomfort of talking about it in these spaces. So you make it about you, and you dismiss the fact that this is not an option. This is not an extra. This is happening to millions of people. And it's really sad that when you enact this, let's just be silent about it, you're not being post-racial. You're not creating in forms of justice. You're colluding with neoliberal whiteness. And, this is why I'm thinking, this is why I put this conference together. Because there seems to be this sincere belief among, and this is Berkeley, right? Berkeley, where it's supposed to be liberal and progressive, and we're not racist white people. This is why I put it together, because there seems to be a huge understanding, this big disconnect, understanding that racism has not gone away, that everyone, regardless of their ethnic or racial identification, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to progress towards liberation, alleviation of suffering, justice, all that stuff, if we're not focused on the reality of what's happening now to millions of people, the anti-Blackness violence that's systemic, right? We see it in Ferguson, we see it everywhere, but, for this person, they're privileged enough to make it about them not wanting to be in spaces that have racial politics in it. But all spaces have racial politics. It's just that when white people encounter it and it's about people of color, then they become uncomfortable. But, when you're a white person and you're not talking about racial politics, that's still racial politics. It's white, racial, raceless politics. So I just want to share that with you. And in addition, another woman wrote back being snarky about the newsletter, and her image, her Google account image also came up to me to be read as a white woman. And her just saying, are white women invited to this too? And I wrote back, I don't understand the way I wrote it. Did you not read the description? Because I just want to make sure when I wrote the whole description of the conference saying it's for people of color and white allies who want to engage in anti-racism, just let me know if that didn't come across, or if you actually read something there that said white people are not invited. And then her response was, whatever. It was just like, this is interesting. So now by mistake, I wrote all of these people, and it'll be interesting to see who responds with that defensiveness or annoyance. And it just doesn't give me anger, but it does break my heart, and makes me very sad because, like I said, that silence, that aversion is just creating more pain and suffering for everyone, including white people. As Frantz Fanon, he talked about that this is not just hurting people of color, those who are colonized. It's hurting the colonizer or the descendants of the colonizer. It's hurting everyone. And ignoring it and silencing it, saying it's too hard emotionally to talk about, it's not going to get anybody anywhere. It's going to make it worse. So those are the thoughts that I want to share with you. And I'm thinking about how to respond to this person from Free Cycle in a way that is kind, but I don't want them to get away with it. I don't want them to feel like, great, I put my neoliberal whiteness into center again, even though they probably don't even name it that way. Everything is nice and fine and cozy while, the rest of us people of color have to figure it out all by ourselves again, right? I don't want them to get away with it. I want to figure out how to address this and just leave them with something to think about and realize that, you're not just going to be exempted from being part of this. We have to do it together. And if it makes you uncomfortable, then that is the least of your problems. Seriously. Like that's not least of your problems, but that's a privilege. It's a privilege if all it does is make you uncomfortable and it doesn't get you killed. So those are my thoughts. And I hope that people will join us for the conference. Remember, it's recorded. You don't have to worry about if you can make the entire event or not. Unlimited access to the recordings with the PowerPoints. And our keynote speaker is Liz Ross, Coalition of Anti-Racist Vegans of Color. She is going to drop some heavy knowledge on us about why it's so important to understand how new forms of racism are operating, the new racial caste system, the new Jim Crow, an era of mass incarceration, and how that you cannot let that go. You cannot ignore that. It has to be part of vegan praxis. And, this is what we're trying to do with the Black Lives Matter movement as vegans, anti-racist vegans of color. Thanks.